going to turn it over to Robyn now. She's going to tell us about her past, her present, and her future. And we'll just let you see her face.
Okay.
There
Thank
she
you.
is.
Thank you, Jim. That's so lovely. So like Jim said, I come from running Breakout West and Western Canadian Music Alliance. Prior to that, I was a talent buyer for Pan Am Games. I throw that one out because there was a lot from Ontario. But I also worked with the Vancouver Olympics years ago and love the talent buying world. But have just had all through my career, my favorite part is working with independent artists and new and emerging and developing artists and industry. So the last few years at Breakout West, I started projects like making us one of the 2 festival partners for the Key Change gender balance project out of UK. As well as making sure that all of our programming was balanced or was equitable in terms of not just gender, but intersectionality within that and cultural diversity across all of our programming for festival artists, for showcase or for speakers, for board, et cetera. So because in my vision was that everything would work better if it was more equitable and that everyone would feel more welcome to come to the table and to be part of it and to gain the knowledge from the incredible speakers we had out. And the more we moved in that direction, and I think that we're all learning and moving forward more and more every day, but the more we moved in that direction, I just saw how much nicer it was a place to work for, how much people enjoyed being there more, how much more engagement we got. And it's true. I mean, across the board, there's so many more opportunities and more benefit out of having everyone feel like something is for them. So moving over to Women in Music Canada was just an incredible opportunity that I couldn't pass up. And I'm so honored and excited to do this work now. And I've only been in this role as executive director since August, but have been working in a development role for about a year now, I think. Liana's on our board and has been for a long time. Really excited about that and about our whole all of our slate of new board members, which we'll be announcing in the next few weeks. And just about all the programming. And I think that a lot of folks that I've spoken to have been hearing more about Women in Music Canada over the last year, 2 years, especially during COVID, looking for connections for community and for support. And that's exactly what we're here to be. We've got a lot of new programming and some that we're renewing and building on. So just a really quick on ours, and then I'll cut into this conversation because we've got 3 incredible people to speak with today as well. But we've just closed submissions for this, but we'll be running our Entrepreneur Accelerator program from January through March. That program is in its 3rd year and is growing from 10 participants to 20 this year. However, we also increased submissions 3 times what we have in the past. So as I believe a direct result of just having some capacity. And I think, I thank our funders for giving the capacity for me to be here and to have more programming coming forward. So that's really wonderful. We hope to have that represent the whole country as we work through the jury. We did just this week also launch our Women in Music Canada Honors Program, which is our opportunity to celebrate and elevate incredible folks in music industry and artistry across the country. And it's a project that we're launching as one of our new core pieces. It will be presented, the awards will be presented on International Women's Day, are open to all women and gender diverse folks. And so do check that out. All of this can be, you can see on womeninmusic.ca. And then in the next week or so, we're going to also launch what the rest of that International Women's Day programming will look like. We will have some workshops coming down. We'll have showcasing. We'll have a number of different things to bring bring folks together to educate and to connect. So so do watch for that. We're also going to run our second, maybe I can say annual now, but meetup at the Junos in Edmonton this year, just bringing people together again to network, to connect. And it was so great to have it last year in Toronto. And then we'll be launching some new programs that I can't quite talk about yet, but looking at building that pipeline, increasing mentorship opportunities, increasing the women and gender diverse folks that we see in senior management roles, as well as just opportunities to showcase both nationally and internationally for artists and their teams. So a lot coming forward for Women in Music Canada. And if you aren't already on our newsletter and on our mailing list, I encourage you to go to womeninmusic.ca and sign up for that and enter your profile into the directory. We launched the directory in March. We have about 1,000 folks on it now, looking to reach our next goal soon. But it is something we're pushing out to the community to use for finding talent, finding speakers, finding industry to work with, producers, etc. We're done with the days where a conference can be primarily male and white. It's we want to remove that excuse that we can't find the right diverse folks to be on that, and this is our answer to, we'll help you find these incredible voices to include. So so that's a bit back around Women in Music Canada. Really excited though to talk about the power of women in music today, and to welcome the speakers we have. I think maybe what I'll start, I want to get on to you guys really quickly, to you folks really quickly, but I think my first question really is why? And I'm going to throw some boring facts out really quickly, and then I'm going to turn it over to each of you and to share your vision on why equity is important in your area of the industry. And I think this is a given question. We know it's important, but let's talk about all the different reasons why and what it can do. And so for my boring stats, I will say, you know, while I knew that we were in a very inequitable organization, we're in an organization that really needs to move in a direction of supporting and engaging more women and gender diverse folks. Once I stepped into this role, I found things like songwriters in Canada are about 14% female, and gender diverse folks, that 9% of company leads in Canada, in the Canadian music industry, are women. 9%. It's insane. We released a study in March, Ontario based, I'll say, but what I'm finding is it's very similar that we see across the country, is that the folks interviewed for that study who were all post-secondary education students coming to the end of their time there, or early to mid career folks, that 81% of them had experienced, this is all female and gender diverse, had experienced some sort of harassment or discrimination because of their gender. 81%. It's ridiculous, and it's huge, and it's the exact reason why I'm sitting here and really passionate about what I want to do. And so to turn over to our audience, or sorry, to our speakers, can I grab Ebonnie first? Can you tell me, for you, what it means and what the importance of having a more equitable and culturally diverse industry means to you?
Means having more opportunity. It means removing barriers to entry, real and perceived. It means balance. It means having a say and a seat at the table, and an opportunity to influence decisions that are going to impact all of us. I think that regardless of the numbers and some of the disappointing statistics out there, that if it's something that you want to do, you shouldn't be discouraged by that. You just have to break through whatever the barriers are, and make sure that you take whatever place it is that you would like to have at the table. And then when you get there, what's really crucial is to lift as you rise and help to make space for others, so that it's not just you holding that place.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Love that. And Ebonnie, with Honeyjam, I would say you definitely meet all these things. That is this a lot of the same pieces you keep in mind in your programming?
Absolutely. So for those who aren't familiar, please follow us at the Honeyjam, and our website is honeyjam.com. It's a nonprofit artist development program. It's multi-genre, it's multicultural, and it's national. And we've been doing this for 27 years. And when we started, I was interviewed and I was asked what my goal was. And I said, my goal was to not have to exist, because we would have finally gotten to a place of some semblance of equity. And here we are 27 years later, and look at the statistics. So there's obviously a lot more work to do. I'm really saddened by the 81% harassment. I had really hoped that things were going to change. And when I saw Jesse Reyes's Gatekeeper, I actually cried. It was so sad to see what was going on and what continues to go on. But I don't give up. So we keep trying, and we call people out, and we get allies to also check people, and people empowered to be allies to make space. So
Thank you. Hill, we're going to come to you next. So you work in a lot of areas, like Jim said, but also in live music, in music production. And this is an area that's very discrepant in terms of balance. And so for you, in your circle, in your world, what is your why? What is the most important piece about why we need to see equity in bigger ways?
Well, I think Ebonnie pretty much touched on the soul and heart of all the reasons why it's important. Creating more diversity and opportunity, having a voice, having representation, having space within our industry is important. And I think for producing and engineering specifically, it's going to create more room for diverse storytelling, and it's going to create a more diverse pool of creativity. It's only going to enrich our community. So obviously I feel very passionately about this, and I have seen things changing quite a lot in the last 5 years. Whereas, 5 years ago, I was interviewed about this very same thing. And I think I could count the amount of women that were doing production and engineering in Toronto, like on one hand, it was me and someone else that I was aware of. And since then, it's quite amazing, because this conversation has started, and it's created more visibility and shone a light on what people are doing. And it's starting to build a community, right? We're all finding each other. It's not that we weren't doing this before, it's that we weren't out there, we weren't visible. So I think, like, moving forward, a big part of what's going to create this shift in equity is visibility and representation. I think that's the first step.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, that's excellent. And I understand you're working also with Manitoba Music and Manitoba Film and Music on some projects here.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm joining as many committees and task forces as I can, just because we're all trying to figure out how to create more equity, and this is a marathon. This isn't something that's going to change overnight. We've seen this in other industries too. My mother entered the architecture profession, and I think she was one of 2 women in her entire faculty. And now, in our generation, sorry, my dog is being very needy today. But in our generation, it isn't even a question. I actually know more women, architects than I know male. So and it was the same for doctors. When I was younger, I actually thought that all doctors were women. When I found out my friend had a male doctor, I was like, what do you mean? But back in the day, this was not the case, right? So I think our industry is just the next in this, this evolution and this journey to reach equity. So the conversations we're having right now, and these community building initiatives that we're all being a part of, I think are the catalyst in this shift that's happening.
I love that. Liana, let's bring you into the conversation. So Liana works with the Canadian, American Federation of Musicians. Sorry, stumbled over a bit. So you work directly with musicians as well as industry. And so like from your area of the industry, what is your big why? What is the most important part and of equity?
Well, I for one want to, I definitely agree with everything that Ebonnie and Hill said, so I don't have much more to add. I was scratching off my list as they were talking, but the one thing that, for one, just being in the union sphere, we're always, we were always about equity and inclusion and making, creating workspaces for anybody. But that said, I mean, of course, unions have been the same, white male, etc. So, more and more women are coming in. We're really actually we have 24 locals across Canada anyway. And I would say there's a good majority, if 50%, if not more, of our local leaders are now female. So, we've seen that happen, which is great, and it's encouraging. And then also when you can see when the outside can see female or people of the BIPOC category, or sorry, I don't know what word to say there, but at any rate, when you see that equity and diversity and in those positions, then when people are on the outside looking in, they can see themselves in those positions. So when you can see yourself in a position, then you can strive towards that position, be it no matter what you're doing in whatever field. The other thing too, as being I'm very young in my organization, as far as that goes, I've been with the AFM CFM for 27 years in various capacities over those years, of course. But as a biracial female, you feel like you have to work 3 times as hard as everybody else. And it's when you're in more of a minority scope, be it just as a female or otherwise, I feel like you almost have to, you have this feeling of having to prove yourself more. And I think the more that we fill these spaces with diversity and inclusion, perhaps those coming into these fields afterwards will not feel that pressure of, oh, I'm kind of on the outside, I have to work harder to prove myself. Not to say that you're not working hard to begin with, but I anyway felt that I had to really strive to work harder for my seat at the table.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hear that. And when Hill had mentioned just getting involved with a lot of different things too, it sounds to me like, I think we're all, you're all very generous with your time. And I think that that's so wonderful. I think that probably we, women in the industry also feel tired at times because we are trying to make these changes, and there's a lot that that ends up being giving of your time, the limited time we have. So I really love that, and I love how generous you are. I want to dive into, I was on a call recently this week, and about change and about how a lot of things that we've learned are ingrained. And at this point, it was really about music, about like the music you fall back to from your childhood. And then you step back and look and go, this is all male. Because, back, I don't know, I think we're probably in a similar age bracket, but when I was a kid, a lot of the music I was exposed to was male. And so, that just being one example, but a lot of the things we do, and like you're saying that, thinking all doctors are female, or areas that we think, were disparaged in the past, how do we be intentional about making change is my question. So I think that we're, humans are creatures of habit and creatures of history, and sometimes comfort comes from what but how do we be intentional about making changes towards more equitable spaces and work and hiring, etc. Ebonnie, go ahead.
So you talked about learned behavior, and that's one of the things that I was thinking about, and thinking about how we were raised, and thinking that it might be a couple of generations before you see a lot of these statistics level out. So for example, as little girls, and you think about Barbie, and there was a whole campaign about Barbie thinking that math was too hard. Like, those were actually commercials, and little girls were seeing that, and they got a lot of heat. And now those things really matter. They really impact on your psyche. And so you need to, from growing up, start seeing the people around you, the images around you, doing some of these other things, being doctors, being a technician, an engineer, a producer. You have to start going into schools. Like, you have to do deep dives on these things, and not just the surface, oh, things are unfair and these statistics are off. It's like, well, how did that happen? Why did that happen? Where do we start? And it really starts from children, and letting them see that really all opportunities are out there for them, and look at what are the images, what's coming into the minds and hearts and heads of people. How are they being taught? So many different things that program us that we need to intentionally change. So I think just in your everyday life, from your family and friends, along with lobbying institutions, like, there's no, you can't do too much, right? So you do whatever you can in as you go through your personal and professional life.
I love that. Liana or Hill, more to add to that about being intentional?
I would just say, well, from my end, I like to share, and I always like to make time for people and to mentor them, especially, those who are younger than me, or not even necessarily younger than me. I find that, there could be like mentoring can work both ways, where you can be a support to one person, they can be a support to you. So I think, just back to my initial comment of sharing, making sure that you're sharing, and you're sharing stories, sharing your problems, those things that, sometimes you hold back because you feel like you're the only one, and you're not the only one. There are so many people, but then, you start talking about it, and everybody doesn't want to say, or doesn't want to show a vulnerability. So I think, yes, to show your vulnerabilities and share your vulnerabilities, then other people, sometimes something can feel so pressing and you don't know where to go. And as soon as you start talking about it, you find that way, and you've got help and support, and so I think sharing would be my big.
Yeah, and to add to all those things, the community building and amplification aspect of what we do is important. Like, we need to amplify each other. I think, especially in Canada, I think in general, even beyond gender inequality, there is a tendency to not acknowledge our peers' accomplishments. It's almost like we're so protectionist and we're scared to share. There's this lack mentality. But for me, I think the most fruitful industries and communities are the ones that support each other. So the biggest focus for me right now is, in addition to just continuing to do what I do, I really love championing the amazing things that my peers are doing as well, because nobody is going to know anything that exists without kind of being introduced to it. And I'm thinking back to that initial statement that Ebonnie made about what our examples were when we were younger. And for me, I was born in the late 80s. And the first spark that I got to start my first band was because I saw the Go-Go's perform in a music video, and I was like, whoa, those are women and they're all playing in a rock band. And I always wanted to do that, but I didn't see it until that moment. And it was literally within 24 hours that I started my first band, you know. And when I saw that Sheryl Crow and Trina Shoemaker had produced and engineered her 2 albums that I was obsessed with, that's what made me think, oh wait, what is that job? And then when I found out what that job was, that's what gave me the spark to be like, oh, that's something that I can aspire to. So the seed of all of this comes in the visibility and the representation. And the best thing that we can all do is just continue being awesome and doing what we do, and find each other and build that community so that we can then lift each other up. And I think that's how the shift is going to change, how the shift is going to happen, rather.
Yeah, I agree. And this is a lot of the stuff I was finding with this study that Sam had done with Women in Music Canada came out in March, that the key themes we were seeing was lack of mentorship, lack of trying to find a good mentor, trying to find women who were in higher level positions of what you wanted to go into, so that you could see it as a long-term career. That there were a lot of people who would get out of their post-secondary education programs and say, yeah, this is great and I want to do it for a bit, but like it's not going to be long-term, because I don't see any other women or any other diverse women in those higher level positions. So it really starts getting a lot to be about let's not just look at change now, but let's look at change long term. There was a comment in the chat here about ageism, and I think that that's something really that does come into play with women more, that maybe more than men, that there aren't a lot of unicorns in the industry who are doing it long term, and so just thoughts on that as looking at this as long-term career. I know for sure I've gone, okay, well, I love what I do, can I keep doing it in music forever? And I'm not sure why that question comes across, but I think that there's a lot of we need to diversify what we have in the industry. We need to bring up the new women and gender diverse folks into our space. We need to create space, but there's a lot of there's still a need. There's still, Ebonnie, you said you've been doing this 27 years and you were hoping that you wouldn't need to anymore, but there is still that need for sure. We're obviously love having you still around. So just thoughts on ageism and how this leads into just another thing that gender diverse folks have to deal with, and women.
When I saw the question come up about ageism, I needed more specificity. Like, what do you mean? Are you saying that there's discrimination against you in a specific profession within the industry where you're not being hired because of your age, or that you aren't seeing women exist in positions in the industry long term? I think we also have to deal with the reality of children and women having such a large responsibility. And so specifically to a job like being a producer and all of the hours that you're in the studio, if you have a family, then you might not be able to sustain that. And you might come out of that and go into something else that might not be as time intensive. So I just wanted to understand, what are we specifically talking about when we talk about ageism?
I feel like there's a lot of overflow from just cultural norms and expectations, right, that are projected on women within our industry. And I think ageism, I think there are issues that women face as they get older that are very real, that our culture imposes on us. I also think ageism works the other way. Like, a lot of what I was dealing with when I was younger, because I was a woman in a position of authority, being a director and being a producer, one of my biggest issues was being taken seriously. I don't know if that was as much me being a woman as it was being a young person that was working under people that were older or above people that were older than me. But I think, you know, this is something that I think is going to shift as our society shifts, because right now I think many women are facing this in other industries too, right? That balance of like, am I taking care of the family? Can I have a career? That balance. I find a lot of my friends in many different industries are dealing with this issue, you know, but I also think there is something that is occurring towards artists or actors or just creative people as they age, that unfortunately they're not given as many opportunities. And I think that's one of the greatest hindrances that creative people are facing right now as they age. And that's a very real thing. Like we see it in Hollywood, we see it in the music industry as well. Like there is a greater value put on younger people, you know.
Mm-hmm.
The person who posed the question said she meant general resistance to accepting women aging on stage.
Mm-hmm. So performers, yeah, it's an interesting question, because I think it's I was part of a women in jazz conference a couple weeks ago, and this definitely came up a lot. And in the jazz world, as with all areas, very similar stats of the number of women, especially once they start having children, families, etc., but also young, and sort of, are you prepared for this? So I think, to your point, Hill, ageism really is on both sides, the young and the older age group. That I think that women are, you know, when someone meets you, when you meet someone new, you think a lot of things. Like you might think, oh, I wonder what they do for a job, or you might think, oh, you know, I like their hair, whatever. Like you think of a lot of things, but for some reason, when you I think a lot more people put age into those questions with women than with men, especially in a work scenario. I've seen a lot of you know, a lot of older men are seen as trailblazers and, you know, heroes for doing it so long, whereas I've worked closely with women who've gone into meetings and been flat out told, you're too old to do this.
I think Lisa LaFlamme is a prime example of that.
Sorry?
Lisa LaFlamme from CTV, who lost her job recently because her hair was gray.
100%.
A horrible example of that.
Yeah, 100%. And so there's a lot of ways to bring in that younger fold and that younger audience without this being like, you know, push out the others. It's about, you know, making space for people who are pushing these things forward, and them making space for others coming up, because this is a pipeline and a cyclical thing that we need to build equity as an ongoing, sustainable thing.
And I think we need to do this, like Jay in the chat just brought up this whole point, that a lot of the grants that go out are supporting people that are emerging artists, right? Mm-hmm. And so we're kind of closing off the pool of artists and diversity that can exist. And we're kind of putting out the message that if you're over 30, if you're in your 40s, you can't possibly have anything to contribute to our industry, which is BS. You know, yeah. So I think that this is also something that we all perpetuate subconsciously. And this is a cultural issue, right? Because our culture doesn't value women as, like, you know, other people might be seen as you said, trailblazers or wise people. But for some reason, when it comes to women being in that stage in their life, that's not treated equally as well, right? So there is an inequity that exists in the ageist, you know.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good point. And Jay, I didn't realize thank you for pointing that out. I didn't know there was actual age parameters around an emerging artist within funding. That's seems out of date. Because a lot of people, I mean, we're not in a world where you do the same career forever. So what about folks who change into a music career midlife? It's very different.
Well, look at Charles Bradley, who didn't break till he was in his 60s, right? And he was making some of the most beautiful, incredible music that exists, you know? So artists, there isn't an expiry on someone contributing artistry and creativity into the world and telling stories, right? That's timeless. So we need to start kind of supporting the broad spectrum of artists and creators that exist. And that to me is true equity, you know, like we can be equitable in many ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I want to thank Janice for your comment. I don't think it was a question, but just we are reading these and thank you for being here as well. Sorry, someone else was about to speak. No? Okay. I'm going to go to a question because we've got a couple coming in here. So, and I know we're going to wait till 10 to, but let's just keep this going. There was a long one here. Where are we? Oh, about safety. So we work in an industry where, especially in the live world, you're not in a traditional workspace. So you're not in an office with a support team all the time. You might be working long hours. You might be alone, or going into a studio, a venue, you don't necessarily know everyone there. So if we could talk a bit about coming back to this, this high stat of folks seeing harassment, discrimination. I think a lot of that stat was more about being passed over, but not all of it. And so it's about, the question is, where and how and who can we safely and confidentially report inappropriate behavior to without the fear of retribution from industry gatekeepers? That's the first part of it. And then, is there a centralized database or department and organization that we can reach out to? That second part of the question, I would say there is not, unless someone else knows. But that's not to say there aren't supports. There just isn't one centralized, is what I'm getting at. But there are, I think there are a number of them, but it also brings up a really good point of maybe that is something we can do better with. Maybe that's something that can be created. From my world with Breakout West, and I know several conferences do this, where they have confidential email addresses that you can reach out to. They usually go to either an equity and diversity and safer spaces rep from the board, or in our case, it went to myself, who could deal with it very confidentially. While I ran the organization, I was not a gatekeeper to showcasing, etc., based on our jury system. So I think different organizations are handling it differently. I want to turn to Liana on this one, because you've worked with CFM, or you've worked a lot with safer spaces and with that. So what are your thoughts on that question?
Okay, so we just to kind of on the heels of the Me Too movement rather, I had brought myself and a couple of others had brought together the live and recorded music industry to discuss discuss what happens in our industry, because you are in venues, as Robyn pointed out, you're not in a more protected office, and offices aren't even always that protected. There's harassment and safety issues that happen in those spaces as well. But you're on a tour bus, you're a female artist with a male band, and maybe it's not your band, but it could be the bus driver, which is a real story that we heard in these collective meetings that we had. So, the harassment can be coming from an audience member, from a tour bus driver, from, wherever. And it's really hard to, very difficult to regulate. At any rate, we had come up with, and I have to give a nod to ACTRA here and the creative, the Creative Arts Coalition in the film industry, that had come up with a code of conduct, which we, as the live and recorded music industry, ended up adopting and signing on to, with the preamble that it spoke to the music community. And so, I mean, there's no obligation, of course. There was many organizations that signed on to this code of conduct, and basically took the oath. So that's where we shared. And we do have, we haven't had a meeting in a while, but we have kept a small committee together to see what next steps can we take. So really, we're looking at education and being able to find a platform or a service where somebody that can be centralized to support artists. Now, I'm always open to speaking to anybody and trying to find a way on a one-on-one basis. If you need input or support, whether you're a member of the the AFM, CFM or not, especially when it comes to making individuals feel protected, especially in a sexual harassment, or even not even a sexual harassment, but an excessive bullying, because that is also harassment. It's not always sexual. But I do know that Unison does have a bit of a program. I believe that they are tied into or have signed on with Morneau Chappelle. I can get more information out to at least this panel, Jim, and the panel, and we can share it with or just go to unison.com, and I believe that there would be some sort of information on their site. Again, it's not Unison specifically providing the service, but you've got there would be some support to call and get advice. So that's about the only thing that I know that would be more centralized, in that they, at least your first call, or, maybe first couple calls. And again, like I said, I would be happy to try to help anybody on a one-on-one basis that may be experiencing a difficulty.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Ebonnie.
One part of the question was about reporting without having to deal with retribution.
Oh,
so let's be very real. That is a very real thing. And there isn't one answer. So if you're dealing with a company that has an HR department, then that's where you would go. If it's a crime, you go to the police. If it's a random producer, what do you do? Again, if it's a crime, go to the police. There is a women's group on Facebook where when women experience these things, they post about it and say, stay away, his studio is not safe, and these things happen. There are women that get blacklisted. There are women who, because of reporting or being known to report, suffer less opportunity. It's just a fact. But if you don't report or do something or say something, how many other people is this going to happen to that your report might have been able to stop? And I think we have to think about that. And it might mean a personal sacrifice, but there's always going to be some other opportunity. But you might take a hit. That's just the reality of it. But I think it's something that we have to do, just as citizens, to protect others.
But you're right. It's important. It's also a big fear. And I get that, because if you're worried that your livelihood could be affected by it, by reporting something, there is a definite fear. And it's funny because when when the Me Too movement and all the different reports were coming forward that hadn't been brought forward before, my partner was saying, well, why didn't they just say something in the time? Why did they put up with it? And he didn't get it because he hasn't been in that space. And I was like, well, because you often think of all these other things, and he's like, but why don't you just say no? Like, why would you want to work with someone who does that? And I'm like, no, I get that. And what you're talking about is the ideal scenario, but that's not where everyone's at. And so I'm going to just say, I want to take this point into consideration. And Liana, maybe we can talk about this offline too, and see how we as Women in Music Canada can support that with with a third party, with somebody who has training to deal with those questions and conversations around a situation where someone either doesn't feel safe reporting it or doesn't feel comfortable or needs to be heard to help them figure out how to deal with it. This can maybe be something we should talk about in terms of what we can do to support. So
absolutely.
Awesome. I think we're getting close to the end, but I think there was another question here, and it was a very
There's
long.
Lots of other questions.
Other questions here, yeah. Mass is sort of feeding these to me. We got that practical another way. When accidents happen, so I'm not going to read the whole one because this is a longer one, but it's about an accident happening where you can't do your performance anymore. How do you move past that? And I think we don't necessarily have an artist well, that's not true. There is some artist experience here, but it's about all of the things I would say in this question. disability, you mentioned fat shaming, etc., that desperately wanting to perform, but there's reasons why it's not working for you right now. I'm not sure, I don't want to put you on the spot, Jackie, but do you have can you hone in exactly what the question part is? I don't know if we have.
I'm unmuting if that's okay.
Yeah.
Hi. The question is there even any point in continuing to try? You know, there's nothing but discouragement a lot of the time. And it's hard to find someone who can help you when you can't run around a stage anymore. You can never kneel again because you've had your knees replaced twice, you know, things like that. I didn't know opioids would destroy my voice. One of those many things that they just don't tell you. And the fight to get back takes all your energy, you know? So especially as an older woman, it's really tricky to keep, I don't know, did you get a question in there? Yeah, just like, what can we do to support ourselves and to find support?
I'm not sure I have the answer to that, to be completely honest. It's a really hard question, and I'm sorry you're having all of this going on. It's I mean, I think, you know, if your passion is performance and it's not working, I know I want to take a little piece of it that I can speak to. So you talked about the hours and the fact that, you know, just not in a position to do the late night shows and be in, you know, venues all day anymore. That you know, I would suggest, you know, those aren't the only places people engage with music. That I'm seeing a lot more, as even with side door access and that type of thing, that are creating more opportunities for artists to take control of how they perform, where and when they perform, and looking at things that are like their Root series. I know there's a number of things they've got coming forward, and I don't want to jump the gun on there, but there's a lot more opportunity, and a lot of that is because they're you know, is stemming from artists not wanting to do the standard late night gig anymore, not wanting to do the same type of things. And so maybe they're looking at avenues like that, where you can be a bit more involved and intentional about what spaces you're performing in, and to what audiences, what sizes, etc. Might be one direction to look. Is that fair to say? I'm sorry, I don't have the answer to all of the question, because it's a lot, and I'd be happy to talk more like offline, but
I also think we can, Unison does provide a lot of support to artists that are going through tough times. So if you haven't gone to them or reached out to them, I would definitely reach out to them. Because yeah, I mean, everything from needing to take time for disability because you're, you know, unable to perform or whatever, they do provide supports for all those sorts of things. So even just for mental health support, which I think like is something we haven't touched upon today, but is something I think we all need to talk about more, because we're all going through really tough times, and luckily an organization does exist that provides that for performers as well. So I would definitely hit up Unison.
Yeah, definitely.
Don't be discouraged, Jackie.
Yeah,
I know it's hard. The life just kicks us in the friggin' face sometimes, and it's really hard to, but like, know that you're not alone. Like, and I think this is where community is also important. It's not just to help, you know, connect us all, but also to help each other get through hard times, you know, and we can lean on our community when we're going through difficult times. I think that's really important too. So, you know, one of us might have not had an answer today, but I think through having discussions and leaning onto this community that exists, you know, we can help each other through these times. I truly believe that, you know, and you aren't alone.
One of the things that Liana talked about was sharing vulnerabilities, which is really key. You look at people and they look as if they have it all together, and then you wonder why you don't have it all together, except that they actually don't have it all together. And many might not want people to know and to change the facade of, you know, who they're pretending to be. But it's very important to do that so that, you know, we're all struggling and how we came through struggle, and give yourself hope and encouragement. Life isn't fair. The world isn't fair. We all get dealt some blows in life. And there are touchstone people that are running other nonprofit organizations that if I'm struggling, I'm going to contact them because they're in the same position as me, and we support each other. And I think that's what you have to do basically, just in life in general.
I agree. I think that's a great way to wrap this part of this conversation, since we're getting towards that 3 o'clock Eastern. But I want to throw one question in, because we are going to capture this. I believe Canadian Musician captures this, and we'll capture the conversation as well. Can everyone on here just throw in the chat a name of a female or gender diverse person who's supported or influenced or had a great positive on your career? I just want to finish this off with some wonderful names in this list, if you have a second before you shut down. And I want to thank Hill, Liana, and Ebonnie for having this conversation. This is, oh man, look at these names. This is amazing. This is great. And I hope we do keep these conversations going. And I'm going to throw my email in the chat as well. Definitely hit me up anytime with these kind of questions. This is exactly what Women in Music Canada is here for. And you know, I'm gonna keep working towards building more and more of what we can do. And I more than anything want to hear and learn and listen to what the needs are and where we can support. Thank you.
Just
everyone.
reading some of these names will put a smile on your face.
Oh, it's amazing, right?
Yeah.
I love it.
Indeed.
So thank you very much, Robyn, and all the great speakers here today, and especially thank everybody that came on a busy day. I know it's not that easy, but I think it's a positive thing. I'll echo Unison. I was one of the founding board members going way back when in the olden days, but they do a lot of financial help for people in the industry, but they have a very large counseling practice as well. They have professionals. And certainly through the pandemic, I mean, the pandemic was just not good for anybody. And especially if you're a performing musician or tech or any of that, I mean, just bad time. A lot of those people, the only income they had was gone in a heartbeat, and a lot of the companies as well. So luckily that's more or less over. But certainly Robyn's organization, I would get involved in that and support that. And I would certainly contact Unison if you haven't. It's unisonfund.ca. It's easy to find. All right. So thank you very much. And we'll talk to you again. Take care. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Everyone.
Thanks for having me.